covered. Oh, recording. Many of the peers and counselors I meet with talk about how their training programs and courses either didn't cover problem gambling well enough for them or at all. So it is really a topic that a lot of people seek out for themselves. So bravo to you for seeking this out. At ECPG, we are neither for nor against gambling or gaming. They are recreational activities, and for most of the population, they stay that way. However, kind of like alcohol is also legal and available. When it does cause problems, it causes major problems, and gambling can be that way as well. It is legal, it is recreational for many, but when it causes problems, it can absolutely be devastating. So we are not for or against, we are for help being available for anyone who is having negative impacts from it. First, I want to give a big thanks to CCAR. So how this came about is I created, and I'll tell you about it. We're launching this program next month and it is virtual, but I created a program that's 6 to 7 hours for peer and recovery coaches to teach them how to work with people with problem gambling. And I reached out to CCAR to say, hey, would you guys approve this for credit? I think people will take it regardless, but I'd love for them to get some credit out of it if they can. And they said, yes, absolutely. We'd be happy to. And can you do this webinar? So big thanks to CCAR for really stepping up to the plate to try to get this problem gambling training available to as many people as possible. Really appreciate them and work with them quite a lot. So today's agenda, first, we're going to have a little bit of a group discussion. So I hope those of you who aren't shy, don't mind unmuting yourselves because we'll be sharing a little bit. And then I'm going to cover some basics with you about problem gambling and some words you should know and some things about language and how problem gambling overlaps with substance use disorders and other disorders. And then hopefully if we have time, we'll actually do a little skills practice on screening and referral. So first, I want to know from you, if anybody's willing to share, and we just need a couple volunteers here, how old you were the first time you ever gambled, and what did it teach you about gambling? And while you guys are thinking about your experience and what you want to share, I can share mine first. So my great grandmother had a old-fashioned lever nickel slot machine in her living room. Well, it was the liquor cabinet off of her living room. Is where the slot machine lived with her alcohol right off her living room. That was my great grandmother, right? And so as a child, my brother and I would take her little bag of nickels and go to her little slot machine and play it until all the nickels were gone. And then she'd come over with her little key and unlock the back and get all the nickels out for us again. And we'd do it all over again and lose them all over again. So what that taught me about gambling at a young age, I had no idea how significant this was until, I got into this field years later, was that if you gamble long enough, it will take all your nickels. Even if you win a little bit along the way, you play long enough, it'll all disappear. I had no idea just how true that was, right? But that's exactly how gambling works. Even if you win a little bit in between, if you play long enough, eventually it'll all go away. That's just how it works. So anybody else want to share? You guys might have had completely different experiences from me. So who might want to share how old you were the first time you gambled and what it taught you about gambling? Lynn, I see your hand up. Lynn Anderson, thank you much.
Hi. So I think I was about 11 and we were selling candy bars at school. And on the corner, I met some gentlemen that were playing a shell game. And the first time I played it, I won, right? And I had the pocket money for school for all the candy bars, right? So they made sure I won the first couple times. And then I lost it all. and I learned a very harsh lesson in life that there was nothing guaranteed with this. And it wasn't quite my thing. But it's definitely entertaining until you lose. So.
Yes. Mercedes?
Hi, good morning, everyone. Similar, started experiencing it very young, probably 2 years old. I mean, as soon as I could remember, as far as like helping my grandpa at the poker table, just quarter, nickel, dime, like family poker, but I would rake in all the money when he'd win and I'd throw the cards down. So I started that way. But got the bug, every time he'd win, I would rack in the prize all the time. So that was kind of my first feel for that. Definitely addicting.
Yeah, thanks. Jason?
Yeah, when y'all started telling your stories, it made me realize I probably was playing like card games and gambling like quarters at maybe, I don't know, 8 years old. I'm not sure. But the first thought that came into my mind actually is because it's a fairly current topic, is like March Madness. And so I remember filling out the brackets because my dad loved basketball and all sports. And I remember filling out the brackets and gambling like we probably at that time we probably put in $10 or something, but the pot's like a couple hundred if you get enough people. And I learned that it was really fun and it made me feel like an adult. And kind of started my love for spectating sports, as well as he actually taught me like a lot of math and statistics because he ran his like office pool. So I'd like help him. So I think that's part of the reason I loved it so much is he let me help him like calculate the scores. And then like after every day or halfway through every day of the tournament, I'm like checking to see how it's going. And so but I do recall that like that kind of started me into sports gambling, um, which I never really had a major problem with control of that, but I do remember like betting on different things like at school. And I know at a couple of years I started an office pool at middle school and high school. So that's interesting.
Yeah. Shane, and this will be our last one. I love these stories. And then I've got another question to throw at y'all.
All right, yeah. Hi, everybody. Thank you. I remember my mom getting scratch tickets, and from an early age, I would play these scratch tickets with her, and we played for 30 years and never won anything. And it was just amazing. Like every day, we would have scratch tickets for 30 years. So yeah, it was just amazing how that all like came together, and then go to the casino, play the slot machines, and just end up leaving with nothing. So absolutely.
Yes. Oh, thank you guys so much for sharing. So I want to point out a few things. Did anybody notice all the smiles when people were talking about these experiences? They can have positive memories. They can have part of memories with people we love. That's normal. And if it's normal for us in this room, guess what? It is for everybody else too, right? That you might work with. The other thing is a lot of people will start experimenting, like experimental ages of substance use tends to be around 15 or 16, but for gambling, it's like half that age. Most people will start their first gambling experience will actually be much, much younger than for substance use. And when you talk about gaming and screen use, it's even younger. Now, not everybody who gets exposed to a gambling activity as a child grows up getting hooked on it. We know that. However, we don't know who will and who won't. And the risk factors are essentially the same as for substance use, be it genetics and things that run in the family, childhood trauma, other environmental things. So we don't necessarily know which young person will or will not end up getting addicted to gambling later on, but we do know there are some things that can put some kids at greater risk. But kind of like substances, even if you got nothing in your family running against you and you had a great environment growing up, just like with substances, if you use enough long enough, you're going to get hooked regardless. Gambling is can be the same. Even if people don't have some of these typical pre-existing risk factors, they can still end up getting hooked on it just because the nature of the game can just be addicting for some. So my next question for you all is, what do you know about problem gambling so far? And I put in parentheses, or think that you know, just because I want to be respectful to the people who are dealing with problem gambling. There's a lot of misconceptions out there. There's a lot of people who think they know a lot about problem gambling. It might not necessarily be true. So, and you guys might have heard some things and be like, is that really true? Like, I don't know. Or is my personal experience, is that common, or is that just an outlier? Right? So what are some things that you feel like you know about problem gambling so far, based on whether it's just general life experience or your professional experience as a peer or coach? Kim, I see your hand.
So, sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Okay. Go ahead.
One of my clients is in recovery for gambling addiction, and she described, and this was news to me because that's not what I'm in recovery for. She described the experience as being like sort of the onset of making the decision to go to the casino as being incredibly fast. It's like a split second. So she can be sort of, going along her way in her car, and then, bam, she finds her way driving to the casino. And I know that's probably true of a lot of people and how they experience their addictions. It's not how I experience mine. So it was really insightful when she made that, when she described that experience to me.
Yeah, great example. So not only can it happen fast, it can happen without a whole lot of conscious thought at all. So if you've ever been driving a route you drive a million times, like to and from work, and you're on your way home and you're like, oh, I need to stop for gas. And the next thing you know, you passed it because you were on autopilot and just drove right past it. It's kind of like that, but even stronger, because you don't get a reward for driving a certain route. But with gambling, you do get a reward from the gambling. So there's kind of this internal motivation for autopilot, in a sense, to take over, and whoop, next thing they know, they're on the route they've always done, and they're at the casino, and what they were thinking about was what they're going to cook for dinner. It can happen very, very quick. A lot of people in early recovery from gambling disorder will intentionally change their driving route for that purpose. In Washington State, we don't have online gambling as much as other states, but we have lots of facilities, both tribal and non-tribal and states, and every gas station sells lottery tickets. I mean, you can't drive anywhere without passing things. So if a person has a particular route and that's where they've normally stopped to gamble, they'll intentionally maybe change that route for that purpose. Yeah. Good. Anybody else? Bill, go ahead.
I found out in my situation that the character defects that I have from gambling are exactly the same as any other addiction.
Yeah, gambling as an addiction functions in a way that is very similar to any others. And I will talk about later some of the similarities, some of the differences, because just like with substance use, two different substances have differences inherently. Gambling also has some inherent differences from other addictions, etc. But in other ways, it's very similar. The way it takes control and your priorities get shifted, and how it just takes control of your time and your mouth and your spending and all kinds of things. All right, and next question for you is this: what else do you need to know about problem gambling in order to better help others? Now, you guys may say things I'm about to cover today, great, or I might cover it our session in April. I'll tell you about that if you want to sign up for it, because it's virtual too. But I'd like to know, what do you feel like you need to know in order to help people who are dealing with gambling related problems? Phil, I don't know if your hand is just still up from before, but let me know if you do have something. But Mercedes, I saw your hand just pop up. Go ahead.
I guess more about the symptoms, right? How to kind of identify it. I guess it's hard, as with any drug. Like it's a spectrum, and sometimes it's not always easy to recognize. But I think being that it's more so kind of acceptable or whatnot, it's more obscure, it's harder to recognize. And also because it's not something that our society readily identifies as an issue or problem. So it's not something that even, just an average person would be trained to kind of pick up on, or, like as with drugs, it's like, oh, it's bad. And so you might look for, or just be trained inherently to notice different like warning signs, if you will, but not so much with gambling. So I'd like to learn more about that.
All right, perfect. I've actually got a nice little list for you. And if I provided the slides to CCAR, I don't know how they might be made available to you, but you do have my permission to get a copy of the slides as a PDF. And so then you can just print out the list I made for you too. All right, Coach Mark, I might mispronounce your last name. Servatius? Coach, do you have something? Hearing nothing, I will move on. All right, so I will cover a little bit of this for you. And like I said,
hello.
Oh, hey, we can hear you now. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I just realized I had my headset muted.
Oh, we can hear you now.
Okay, thank you. You'll probably get to this at the end, but I'd just like to know more resources. Of course, I'm down here in DC in the Mid-Atlantic, and years back I used to send people up to Proctor up in Illinois, but it's good to know you're out there. But local resources are good too, other than just the obvious stuff like GA. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. And you know what? Let me go ahead and speak to that for a second, because I don't think I have the national helpline listed in my slides here, but there is one. There is a national problem gambling helpline through the National Council on Problem Gambling. If you Google it, it'll come right up. A lot of states have their own helplines as well. Washington State does. I do not know if Illinois does, but you could look it up and you'll be able to find out. And you may have certified gambling counselors in your state, in your area. You can look those up on the International Gambling Counselor Certification Board website. They have a directory of all certified gambling counselors across the country that have their national one. That being said, in Washington State and other states, we also have a state level certification. On our website at ECPG, on our provider directory, we list everybody both nationally certified and state certified who works in Washington State. So that's how we do it. But every state's different. So if you look up certified gambling counselor in your area, then you'll be able to find the treatment providers. But like you mentioned, there's also GA, and there's Gam-Anon, and there's gamblersinrecovery.org, and there's a variety of other support group meetings. There's Gambling Recovery Podcast, which are really nice because then you're not dependent on someone else's time schedule. You can just pull up a nice motivational, inspirational podcast to connect to this thing anytime. 3 o'clock in the morning doesn't matter. So yes. All right. So this program here, Introduction to Problem Gambling for Peer and Recovery Coaches, we are launching this in April at our, oh good, my laser pointer, at our Focus on the Future conference. It is April 25th to 26th. If you're local Washington people, Oregon people, feel free to come join us in person. Would love to see you. If you're elsewhere, this particular session we're offering virtually. Not all of the sessions at this conference are going to be available to virtual attendees, but this one is. So if you go to our website, it's the in-person training Focus on the Future conference, and you can look up more about this program. So this program is based on CCAR's Recovery Coach Academy principles, teaching people a little bit more about problem gambling than I'm going to have time to cover today, as well as the principles of recovery coaching and how to then apply that to working with problem gambling. So it's going to go much, much more into depth than I've got today. It also comes with the Train the Trainer program. if you want to then take these concepts and back to your facility where you work at, if you have other peers that want to get on board with this, then you can do a train the trainer element. So that is available to you. And again, it's in the slides with the link. If you get the slides afterward, you can just click on that. All right, we're going to do a little trivia game here first. And let's see, let me get my chat box available because you guys can just put your answers in the chat. If you're not familiar with Zoom, if you look at the bottom of your screen, there's a little chat bubble which says the word chat. You just click on that and that'll open it for you. And then you can type in your answers here. So what makes a game a gambling game? And multiple are true. So you can put in as many of these letters as you want. A, if you place a bet on who will win. B, if it costs you money. C, if there's an element of complete chance. Or D, if there's a prize. Lots of people are saying all of them. Some people say A, B, A and D. All right. Technically, it's A, C, and D. If a game costs you money, that's not necessarily a gambling element. You can pay money for a game. You can pay money within a game, in-app purchases or whatever. There can be direct purchases within a game, but if you're making bets, if there's wagers, if there's an element of chance, there's a prize, that's what makes a game a gambling game. And here's an easy 3-word way to define gambling. Easy to remember, easy to repeat to other people. Prize, chance, and consideration. There's a prize to be won, something of value. It could be an expensive pen, right? Like there's some sort of prize to be won. It doesn't matter what it is. There's some element of chance, even with quote unquote skill-based games. Could be like sports betting. I know nothing about sports. I tried to watch them. It didn't stick. Okay. So I'm not going to be a very good sports bettor. My husband, on the other hand, is probably going to be better than me. But even with that, there's an element of chance. Even with the skill-based games, there's still chance. Okay. And consideration means I'm putting something up for consideration. This is my investment. There is something of value. It doesn't have to be money. It can be serious effort or time or an object. So young people who maybe don't have jobs, they bet other things. They can bet their jewels. They can bet their games. They can bet whatever they have of value. All right. So think of it this way. I'm putting something of value on the chance to win a prize. That makes it gambling. So you can essentially take any game and make it a gambling game. All right. A group could be playing the game Uno. Uno is really just a card game, but you start making bets on who's going to win the game of Uno, you've just turned it into a gambling game. All right. And basically throughout history, we literally have hieroglyphics on cave walls about gambling, okay? Where there has been humanity, we have been betting on stuff, all right? It's just part of human nature to be betting on outcomes of games. Don't ask me why, but we like to do it, all right? Now, you're gonna hear a lot of different terms around problem gambling. Someone says any addiction is gambling. In a sense, it's true. It's like gambling with your life and your health in a sense. Now, when I use the term gambling, though, I do mean something very specific. But I would also argue that in Washington State, driving in your car when it's raining is a bit of a gamble too, but that's also different. So you're going to hear a bunch of different terms. They do have different contexts. All right. So let's talk about problem gambling. Is it, and you can put A or B in the chat. There's just one. They're not both correct. A, when someone gambles every day and spends at least $500 a week. Or B, a term used loosely to refer to any range of problems associated with gambling, from losing more than you can afford to a severe loss of control, cravings, and major life problems. Excellent. I'm seeing lots of B's. Yes, this one is rather easy. What I'd like to point out here is the frequency of how often a person gambles or the amount of money they're spending is pretty much irrelevant. All right. A person could gamble every day. They could spend $500 a day. It doesn't mean they have a problem. They're bringing in $1 million a year, more money than I'm ever going to see in my life. It might just be their recreational money, completely within their budget, not causing issues. Yes, that can happen. All right. Now, if you look at heroin and someone's smoking it once a month, someone's injecting it once a day, that tells you a lot about the severity of the disorder that person is having to live and deal with. But with gambling, it does not work like that. You cannot conclude a single thing based on how often they're gambling or how much they're spending. What you're looking for is what's the impact on their life. If I were to gamble every day and lose 500 a week, this would have a big severe impact on my life. Okay, that would definitely be causing problems. For another person, might be within their limits. That's within their budget. They can do that. So it's all about the impact it is having. Don't jump to conclusions, right? Someone tells you how much they're spending or losing. Don't automatically go, or, oh, that's no big deal, because you don't know what their situation is, right? You can't compare it to your own situation. All right, next, compulsive gambling. Is it a term generally used to describe compulsive gambling behaviors used in Gamblers Anonymous literature and not used diagnostically? Or B, someone who has gambled every dollar to the point of living under a bridge? Is it A or B? Yes, seeing lots of A's. Excellent. Also not too difficult here, right? Now, you'll hear people talk about people in very stigmatizing ways when they think of a person who has a gambling problem. People just jump to these extreme images of people being homeless, gambling all of their money, etc. That's not reality for a lot of people. Sure, that is reality in some cases, but a lot of times the person who's experiencing gambling problems is your own sweet beloved grandmother. Stable, loving home, rock of the family, right? There's not a stereotype, and just like any other addiction, addiction does not discriminate. It's an equal opportunity issue. Gambling is the same, does not care who you are, where you're from, what your family background is, doesn't care. All right, pathological gambling. Oh, and if you are familiar with GA at all, compulsive gambling is the term you're going to read in their literature and products and stuff. That's kind of the term that they use, and many people will use it for themselves. That's fine. Pathological gambling. Is it A, when a person resorts to lying, cheating, and stealing to support their gambling habit? Was it a diagnostic term in the DSM-4? DSM stands for Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Health Disorders. Awesome. I'm seeing more A's coming through. Keep putting in some answers there. Anybody else want to take a guess? This one's a little harder, isn't it? This one was B. So pathological gambling was the clinical diagnosis prior to 2013. However, a lot of people said A. Guess what? Not uncommon, because when people hear the word pathological, what do they think? Lying, cheating, and stealing. Has nothing to do with that. Might there be those behaviors for some people sometimes? Well, sure, but that's not what pathological gambling is. It was actually a clinical diagnostic term. So when I'm reading articles and research and data, etc., and I see the term pathological gambling somewhere in a quote, I immediately jump to the date. It's almost always prior to 2013. It was just the term to use at that time. It has since changed. All right. Last one, gambling disorder. A silly phrase that professionals use to talk about someone's moral ineptitude. B, the current diagnosis, according to DSM-5, mild, moderate, or severe gambling disorders can be episodic or persistent or in early or sustained remission. Awesome. Seeing lots of B's. You guys are fantastic at this. Yes. So pathological gambling got renamed gambling disorder. it got moved from impulse control disorders to the substance use disorder section. They realized, wow, gambling disorder looks like an addiction, sounds like an addiction, acts like an addiction. It has much, much more in common with substance addiction than it does with any other mental health disorder. We've put it in the wrong section and they moved it. And just like with substance use disorders, they can be mild, moderate, or severe. So can gambling. Just like substance use disorders can be an earlier sustained remission, depending on how long it's been since the person has experienced problems from it. Gambling disorder can as well, but gambling disorder can also be episodic or persistent, which means persistent is they've had gambling problems and symptoms for a long period of time, and episodic means they kind of come and go, a little bit like binge drinking. A good example of this is actually sports betting sometimes, right? If a person has one sport that they bet on, when that sport is in season, they can have a whole host of problems. And then that sports season ends and they might not gamble at all until the next year. That's just an easy example of how it can be episodic, but it works that way. And also for people, symptoms kind of come and go. So no, it is not, it doesn't have anything to do with moral anything. It's just an addiction disorder, just like any other in that regard. All right, bonus, professional gambling. Is it A, someone who gambles on skill-based games as a profession, usually are sponsored and generally does not display life problems associated with gambling? Or B, someone who is so good at gambling at a gambling game that they win more than they lose? Yeah, seeing lots of A's. Good job. So, have you known anybody who called themselves a professional gambler and you're like, yeah, really? Just because someone fancies themselves to be a professional does not make them a professional gambler. Okay. And for many people, what happens with gambling that is a little bit unique is the bets people make are relatively small compared to when a win is had, right? The bets might be cents or dollars, the wins might be hundreds or thousands of dollars. So what it can end up feeling like is I'm very good at this. Look at how much I'm winning. But the bets, small as they are, they add up quick. And often what happens is people have the math wrong if they're not actually tracking it. They think they're winning more than they're actually winning. Okay. And then they get their tax statement back in April. This is about to be a big issue. For anybody in recovery from gambling, April is a big deal because of tax season. Okay. When they get their tax season back, their tax statement, and they're like, oh crap, this is not how I thought I was coming out this year. So professionals who are actual professionals at this, they stick with skill-based games only. There's really no such thing as a professional slot player or professional roulette player. Even people who are professional blackjack players kind of say, you really can't win. It's more about strategy on when to pull out. Okay. You people who write books on this stuff are like, blackjack's misleading. You really can't win at it unless you just pull out at the right time. So they stick with skill-based games. It's usually their profession. It's not 8 to 5. They usually have to travel around to tournaments and whatever. They're often sponsored, meaning someone else is actually paying for their travel and their hotel and actually puts up the money that they're gambling with. And then the losses are kind of part of it, but that way the professional isn't absorbing all the losses themselves. But then if they win, they split it with their sponsor. It's a job, and they don't gamble to numb out. They don't gamble as recreation. They don't gamble on luck-based games and things like that. It's done very, very differently than most people recreationally play. And generally does not display life problems. However, can it? Absolutely. Absolutely. A person may either start playing competitively and become professional and it turns into something that causes them problems. Yeah, that happens all the time. Or actually, in one of the gambling recovery podcasts I was listening to, a guy came on who talked about he was having problems before. It was playing poker was basically taking over his life. but he did get good at it and he went professional, mainly pushed that way by his addiction though, right? So it can, which comes first, chicken or the egg? I don't know, but there's a difference between playing professionally skill-based games versus someone who's like, I'm a professional. Well, are you? So you don't be misled there. All right, I want to talk about stigmatizing language in the field of gambling recovery, because as I know in this group, you all are very well informed of, or I'm going to assume you're well informed of stigmatizing language around substance use, addiction, and disorders in recovery. There's also that for problem gambling as well. So now what I tell people is we want to stay away from labels, right? And more towards referring to the issue, the behavior, the disorder, the disease, whichever. And I kind of compare this to saying a person's a diabetic or a cancer patient versus a person has diabetes, a person has cancer, right? A person's disorder does not define who they are. It's a tiny fraction of their life that they've just had to deal with and been affected by. So labeling them as like that disorder defining them is very not respectful, right? So by referring to them, they're just a person who happens to be affected by it is much more compassionate language. So in problem gambling, what that might look like is saying a person with problem gambling, affected by addiction, reports gambling has become compulsive. Now, a person might say, hi, my name is Tana. I'm a compulsive gambler. That's fine. A person can refer to themselves as a flying purple people eater for all I care if it's helpful and therapeutic for them. But as a professional, I am going to choose to use whatever language I can think of to be most respectful and compassionate. They can use for themselves, whatever, but I'll use what I can think of as most compassionate. And sometimes when a person says, hi, my name is, or whatever, I'm an addict, part of me is wondering, wow, have they worked really hard to get to the point where they can own something and be able to verbalize it and say that, and that's very therapeutic for them? Or are they using those words because someone else called them that and they just don't have other words that they prefer, right? So that's why I always want to err on the side of compassion. And hey, if I help give someone some other language they'd rather use and feel more comfortable with, great, I'm cool with that. So if this is helpful, it does take a few more words out of your mouth to say a person with problem gambling rather than just a label. But when you start to integrate this into a conversation, and I say this from experience because I've used all these terms in my past as well. Don't judge yourself for what you did before. It doesn't matter. You just, use compassionate language once you get some. I can feel the shift in the conversation. Okay. I might be talking with someone and they say the word problem gambler and I say person with gambling disorder. And then I hear them start to mirror me. And then they start to say person with gambling disorder. And it shifts the tone of the conversation. And you can feel it become more respectful and more, oh, we can treat this. We can help them. This is something people overcome all the time. This is recoverable. So that's just, if that is helpful for you, I hope that it is. And this one, experiencing gambling related harms, is also one that's becoming more popular now. And someone I was just talking to who is in the research field said that researchers are starting to try to use this one more, because for years and years and years in research, they'd put people in nice little buckets and call people problem gamblers in their little research buckets. And that's what it says in all of our data. But she said they're starting to shift away from that language and use things like experiencing gambling related harms. Right? Because you ask people, do you have a gambling problem? They're like, no. But you ask, have you ever experienced a gambling related harm? Oh yeah, I blew my budget last weekend. Right? It just feels more realistic and relatable. All right. Continuum. So there are people who do not gamble at all whatsoever, any. They usually have a reason for that. It might be someone in their family had a gambling problem, so they stay away from it. Or it might be they're just like, why is losing money fun? This is not fun to me. I do not get this, right? It's just not their thing, so they don't do it at all. A lot of people, and this is not to scale, okay, it's just a pretty little image, but a lot of people gamble recreationally. I've bought a few lottery tickets in my lifetime, right? It's just recreational. They may do it, they may go for retirement parties or social get-togethers or buy tickets or scratchers or whatever. It's just a fun thing to do, and that's about it. At-risk gambling is when we start to see things like starting to spend more than they meant to, starting to spend more time than they planned, maybe start lying about it, and lying by omission counts, right? Just not telling people how much that counts too. But starting to be a little bit risky, or thinking of gambling as a potential income rather than an expense for entertainment. That's a very risky state of mind. It is literally just an expense for entertainment. But many people are so drawn by the potential win, they start to think of it as not an expense for entertainment that might pay out, but I'm going to gamble until I win something. This is going to help supplement some income or something. And problem gambling is, honestly, problem gambling can be used often for both these last two categories, just as a general broad spectrum. Any level of problems impacted. Gambling disorder is very specific. There's 9 diagnostic criteria. It means they meet at least 4 of these, okay? If a person meets 1, 2, or 3 diagnostic criteria, they are having some problems. Not the 4th, we might say they have problem gambling. It's important to note, though, a lot of people just assume these on the very end are the ones experiencing the problems. Anybody can. Even people who do not gamble at all can experience gambling-related harms because of someone else's gambling they are close to. Okay, so when we're looking to help people affected by gambling-related harms, we are not focusing just on those with a gambling addiction. All right, we're focusing on absolutely anybody having any form of gambling-related harm anywhere on this spectrum, theirs or somebody else's. All right, if all we focus on is trying to like hunt down people with a gambling addiction and then see what we can do for them, we're going to miss so many other people that could use our help. And it might be very simple. It might be helping them to consider setting some better limits or leaving a card at home when they go play. And that can actually be incredibly helpful for them at that situation in their life. And that's all that's needed. So I'm just putting this out here because I want you to think broad. All right. This ripple effect is all through our society. And so we want to just have a big open mind on all the different ways it can impact so many people, and not just have this narrow focus on just it being a full-blown diagnosable disorder. All right. So some examples of gambling related harms, and this comes from the study. The next 3 slides are all going to come from the study. I love it. This study looked at 6,000 people. It was a huge sample size, and they all had gambled in the last 6 months, and it was all more than just lottery. So huge sample size of people who were like at least recreational. Okay, that's almost unheard of in our research field. And first they did a little gambling screening tool with them to determine, are they almost no risk, low risk, moderate risk, high risk of having a gambling disorder. And then they asked them this whole long 72 item questionnaire of gambling related harms. And here's just a few of them on more of the mild kind of spectrum that people might indicated they'd experienced. So sold personal items, late payments on bills, less spending on recreational expenses, a reduction of my available spending money. I can't buy my new gym clothes because I lost it at the casino. It happens, right? Whatever it is. Neglected my hygiene and self-care. Loss of sleep due to spending time gambling. Ate too much. Increased my use of tobacco. A lot of casinos are going tobacco free these days, which is fabulous. But a lot of them you can still smoke in them, right? And often what people do is they'll sit there and smoke more while they're in the casino than they do when they're not in the casino. Neglected my relationship responsibilities, spent less time with people I care about. And here's some more severe examples of gambling related harms. Bankruptcy, of course. a loss of significant assets, took an additional employment. So they literally have to get a new job or a second job because of it. Attempted suicide. I'll talk more about that in a minute. Committed acts of self-harm, increased use of health services. They're seeing the doctor more because of the physical health issues they're having because of the gambling, which think any stress-related health issue. And there's a lot of stress-related health issues we know about, right? Any issue associated with sedentary activity, lack of physical activity, poor nutrition, poor hydration, poor sleep, all of these things have huge health impacts on us. Actual separation or ending a relationship, whether be it divorce or separation, moving out, something like that. Social isolation, losing a job, thoughts of running away or escape, felt worthless. So lots of different things people can have to live with. And last slide on this study. This is here's an image I find very impactful. So there's 72 item gambling related harms fell into these categories: deviance, emotional, psychological, work, study, relationships, health, financial. Just look at the financial related harms. Almost 50% were actually reported by the people who fell under the category of responsible gamblers. Responsible recreational, those who are playing just as a form of entertainment, can still experience financial related gambling harms. This is went on a vacation, blew my budget, kicking myself the next week, right? Doesn't mean they have a full-blown gambling disorder, but they can have some financial impacts. I wasn't able to do as much recreational spending because I lost money this week, or I wasn't able to pay this because I lost money this week, or I had to pay extra on the credit card, or whatever it is. A lot of people who are gambling are having issues. It's only this category over here that are those most likely to actually have a gambling disorder. All of these other gambling related harms are reported by everybody else. All right. So what's the overlap? Problem gambling, mental health, substance use disorder, gaming, spending, whatever else, fill in the blank. So this picture of spaghetti, I mean, this is how they impact each other, right? So a person has gambling problems. They lose a lot of money. They're now stressed out, feeling anxious, probably not sleeping very well. They might start drinking alcohol at night to help them go to sleep. They might start gaming to try to stay away from gambling. They might go do some compulsive spending because it's something else to do, or they're feeling stressed and feeling like crap, and it's there and it's on sale, and that's what you do when you're feeling like crap. You kind of act compulsively when you might otherwise not if you were having a better day. And then they go on and do something else. And now they're really feeling lousy about themselves, so then they go and gamble again. Flip this around any order. I could give you a whole nother example. Okay, but what we eat, how we sleep, how we feel, how we talk to other people, it all affects these other areas of our life. And problem gambling, or when gambling causes problems, it just throws a little marble right in there with all of these other issues bouncing around in our life. So what's the overlap with problem gambling, mental health, STD, and all these other issues? You name it, they're all connected in a person's life. The difficulty is, in our behavioral health systems, we like to silo things by the funding available, right? So then it's up to us to try to translate our nice little siloed, this person does mental health, and this person does STD, and this person does peer and recovery coaching. This person is the doctor who can write your prescriptions. And we have to help them navigate these siloed symptoms when what they're dealing with is all meshed together in their life every day. Yeah, I see Mercedes nodding. Yes, this is our reality. But you know, we kind of signed up for this. We can't expect them to navigate this by themselves. That's why we're here. We're going to help. So I'm not going to go through all of these diagnostic criteria. I just want to highlight something. So this is the internet gaming disorder criteria proposed, because it's not got its own code yet. Gambling disorder, they have to have 4 out of 9 total, and substance use disorder, they have to have 2 out of 11. Substance use disorder criteria fall into 4 categories: physiological issues like tolerance and withdrawal, impaired control issues, causing harm, worsening mental health or physical health issues, or use in hazardous situations, etc., and then lifestyle impacts, basically. And if you look at the gambling disorder and gaming disorder criteria, they kind of fall into those same types of categories as well, worded a little bit differently. They're very, very similar that way. Now, they're probably similar because it's been around and it's the same people working on this, and this is how they see things, whatever. But these impacts and life problems associated with these disorders make sense. A lot of the problems that people have from this stuff can fall into some of these categories, but not all of them. All right, substance use versus gambling disorder. There's some similarities and some pretty key differences. The similarities here are pretty self-explanatory. Y'all know what loss of control and denial are. Depression and anxiety comes with it. Progressive tolerance withdrawal. Like I said before, if you gamble enough, long enough, you can get hooked, even if you got nothing else working against you. You may choose to gamble, you may choose to drink, you don't choose to develop a tolerance, you don't choose to develop withdrawal. That's going to happen whether you like it or not, but it can happen with gambling as well. People can detox from gambling. People do have withdrawal from gambling. You ever taken a cell phone away from a 16-year-old? You might have seen some withdrawal symptoms. Okay, so you can have withdrawal even to a behavioral thing that you're dependent on. Gambling does have cravings. It does have a preoccupation and fixation, not just with, I want to feel the rush again, but this is, where am I going to get the money? What am I going to tell my spouse? What am I going to say to these collection callers? What am I going to tell my boss? When is the next time I can gamble? What am I going to do with this free play? It's everything revolved around, not just like craving time. Blackouts. So you guys might have experienced a blackout somewhat similar if, say, you're like on your phone wasting time. And next thing you know, more time has passed than you thought. Right? And you're like, ah, crap, I should have gone to bed half an hour ago. All right, well, gambling does the same thing, but on steroids. A person can gamble, can get so much in this dissociative zone that they are unaware of a person standing next to them trying to talk to them, or they are unaware that it is now dark outside. They're unaware how many hours have passed since they've been there. There can be similar escapes and highs and rushes, same kind of brain changes. That's why it's addicting. Continue despite negative consequences, and they have genetic and environmental vulnerabilities for gambling as well. For example, you can either raise your physical hand or your digital hand if you can find it, don't care. If you at some point in your life have heard that alcoholism can be hereditary, or that a predisposition to alcohol use disorder can be passed down in families. You learned it in school, or your family told you, or whatever, right? A lot of you have, and some of you might just be looking for a button, but thanks. But not many people learn that the exact same thing is true for gambling. Just not educated, just not told. Same kind of a risk. Differences are, gambling is often referred to as a hidden addiction. There's no track marks, there's no bloodshot eyes, there's no smell on the breath, there's no slurred speech. Your kid walks in with bloodshot eyes, smells like weed, sounds like they're high. They can tell you they didn't smoke it all they want. You're like, yeah, you smoked it, kid, right? But with gambling, there's no sign. All right. And a lot of partners will actually conclude that an affair is going on, because they know there's been lies, there's been unaccounted time, there's been loss of money they won't account for, etc. They don't know. They have no idea that it's the gambling. And how finances are managed in the household varies household to household, right? Some people kind of tag team it. In a lot of households, it's kind of one person manages it. Well, if that person is the one gambling, the other person's never going to know. There's no overdose, right? With substances, you use enough, your body physically will shut you down, okay, because they're poisonous. But with gambling, there is no overdose. A person can literally gamble into millions of dollars of debt and criminal debt and never be able to pay it off in their lifetime. Huge financial problems. Substances can be expensive, yes, but gambling tends to cause bigger financial problems a bit faster. There's no drug screen. There's nothing to ingest. I mean, you can drink while you're at the casino, but you're not consuming gambling. The public perception is way behind that for substance use disorders. There's higher rates of suicide attempt and ideation. Gambling disorder or addiction problem gambling is very, very deadly. It does kill people. Your work, being aware of problem gambling, having safe space conversations for people to talk about their gambling problems will, in my opinion, guaranteed to save lives. You will probably never know, but the suicide attempt and ideation rates are so high that if you integrate this into your work, you are very likely to save lives within your career. Right? Probably will never know, but you will. There's less funding for it. There is no federal funding. There's fewer resources. Let's see, Jamie, Mercedes, I see some hands up. I don't know if those are just left over for before, but do you have a question?
Mine's not. I just wondered if you had any like more specific statistics on how the suicide rates compare to that of other disorders.
Yeah, so when I quote statistics off the top of my head, please don't quote me to anybody else. I don't have them in front of me, okay? But generally, and this, I'm going to give you ranges because, of course, it depends on what year the research study was done, where in the world, what part of the population, etc. But general population suicide attempt rates tend to be around 1 to 2%-ish, maybe less. Substance use disorder population suicide attempt rates tend to hover around 7 to 9%. Problem gambling, pathological gambling, gambling disorder, depending on what year they did it and how they measured it, tend to hover between 13 to 25%. Right. So generally the number you're going to see quoted most places about 20%, kind of right in the middle is where people tend to hover. So about 20%. That's 1 in 5 people actually attempt. They do something. They have already done something to try to take their life. When you talk about ideation, thoughts about it, then the numbers jump up to 65 to 85%. It's astronomical. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Good question. And there's there's so many research studies on that. And like I said, they all kind of give a different number depending on how it was done, et cetera. But that's kind of the range where it tends to hover. All right, who is at risk? Here's your little checklist. And this can be very, very helpful when working with other people. You're having conversation, this is part of it. And they're like, I don't know, am I addicted? Am I at risk of being addicted? I don't know. Well, here's some guidelines. I have someone in my family who has gambling, substance use, or mental health problem. Now, these things actually share genetics. They don't know exactly why, but mom or dad has an alcohol use disorder. Kid is more at risk, not just of an alcohol use disorder, but also any other substance and gambling. Mom or dad has a mental health condition. Kid is at risk, not just of that mental health condition, but also for substance and gambling addiction. Right. And a lot of people, they may say, well, I'm going to stay away from this substance because I saw what it did to my parent. But then they end up getting addicted to gambling because nobody told them that they were at risk of that too. They have the information and the capacity to make a healthy choice. Clearly, they did that by staying away from this substance. but nobody told them that gambling was just as much at risk. So that's why we want to educate young people and young adults and everybody. I have a substance use or mental health condition. So number one risk factor is any pre-existing substance addiction. And I have had people come into gambling treatment who said, I started gambling because someone in my 12-step group told me that it was a recovery safe activity because I had never used substances in a casino before, right? Gambling wasn't, their previous substance addiction wasn't associated with gambling in any way in their life. So someone said, well, gambling would be a different safe activity for you to do now in recovery. Well-intended, just misinformed. Then they ended up getting a gambling addiction and going through treatment all over again for a different thing. So general population, I give lots of guidelines on how to gamble safe. Substance use disorder population, I say you're better off just staying away from it. All right, just, you don't want one other problem. If you don't gamble now, don't start. The last thing you need is something else to have to deal with. You're just better off staying away from it. I have had a big win or some small wins early in the gambling. Those wins are the hook that to convince the person, oh, I'm good at this. This could be an income for me. And just by random chance, some people, when they first gamble early on, they're going to lose, and other people are going to win. Those people who win, they are the ones most likely to end up getting addicted later on. I am drawn to things that might offer me a quick or easy way to make money. Well, that makes sense. I am drawn to things that allow me to zone out or numb out and just forget about everything. Gambling is so effective at this. To just zone out, dissociate, forget, go numb, etc. I have experienced some traumatic events or recent loss. I have a lack of support, boredom, or free time, a lack of direction, or limited hobbies. Again, gambling can fill this and fill it to excess. I don't track my wins, losses when I gamble. Most people don't track their wins or losses when they gamble, and that's a very risky move. It's much, much better to keep very strict track of those things. I sometimes gamble more than I meant to, or for longer than planned. Again, this happens to a lot of people, but you want to pay attention and be mindful of that. Yeah. Oh, an AA group used to host a big roundup in Vegas. Many didn't make it through Sunday. Yeah. Yeah. Murder for gambling debts. Well, I don't know anything about that. Let's hope that's not common. Realm of possibilities, absolutely, but I can't say anything to that. I have had someone say that in their 12-step experience, their AA recovery group, or a handful of them, would get together for poker nights. And now that she's more informed about gambling, she's like, that was not smart. I'm like, right, well-intended, just misinformed. Here's where we can help. All right, so what is responsible gambling? Can I get a volunteer to read these for me, if you can see the screen large enough to read it?
What is responsible gambling? 1, set a time limit before you go and stick to it. 2, set a money limit before you go and stick to it. 3, gamble only for fun. It's an expensive entertainment, like seeing a movie. 4, accept losing a part of the game. You are paying to play a game. 5, don't borrow money to gamble, not even from yourself. Only gambling if it is in your budget. Do you have a budget? 6, don't let gambling interfere with your family, friends, or work. Stop if it causes problems. 7, don't gamble to win win back losses. You accept to lose, and when it's gone, it's gone. 8, don't gamble to get money. It's not a source of income. It's an expense for fun. 9, don't gamble to cope with emotional or physical pain. Don't self-medicate with it.
Thank you. These are pretty strict, huh? You think most people stick to these? Hence why that study showed even recreational players experience a lot of problems. Yeah. This last one is the big, like, woo, open the door for addiction to just step right through, right? That's kind of the self-medicating, and it teaches the brain this is now a solution to something rather than just a recreation. And that's what kind of can set a spiral real quick. So these are great guidelines for general population. However, when a person has developed a gambling disorder, once it has gone to the realm of addiction, this is almost like saying to someone with an addiction, why don't you just stop? All right, this is not helpful. Once gambling has become a gambling disorder, they have tried all of things. Every which way you can think to try all of these things. They do not work anymore. That is why we have gambling counselors and treatment programs. All right. So again, great for general population, great for prevention, great for education, great for people just starting out to help make sure it stays that way. But once gambling is taken over, a different approach is needed. All right. All right, screening and referrals. So gambling screens, there's short ones, like these are a few short ones, 2, 3 to 4 questions, 9 questions. There's long ones. A screening is not something that diagnoses. You go to the doctor's office, you get a clipboard, you answer a ton of screening questions. Based on how you answer those screening questions, your doctor will then ask you some more questions once you get back in the room based on what you said you weren't worried about, etc. The other day, I saw my doctor about a skin issue. He asked me a few screening questions, this, that, and the other, and then made a referral to a dermatologist. Gambling screens work the exact same way. It doesn't say there is a problem. It says there might be a problem, and I'm going to refer you to a specialist to get more answers. That's all it does. You don't have to be a doctor, counselor, therapist, clinician, anything. A front desk person can do a screening. A person can go online and fill a screening out themselves, by themselves, no help at all from anybody else. They're very low barrier just to say there might be an issue, and based on your answers, would recommend getting a professional opinion for more information and options and what you want to do. That's it. So when people say screen refer, screen refer, screen refer, here's your screening tools. Very easy ones. There's more out there, but these are ones that are pretty short and sweet and easy to integrate, have on hand. And then screen refer, here's your referral list. All right, now in Washington State, we have a problem gambling helpline. I should have put the national one on here too, I'm sorry. You can have the national problem gambling helpline. Our website's a great resource. Wherever you are in the country, it's still a great resource for you. Your state, whatever state you live in, might have a resource from the a state agency as well. You'd want to look into that. You want to find out where's your local providers. If you're in Washington State, we have a counselor directory of local providers. If you're in another state, you can look up certified gambling counselors through IGCCB's website and find what providers might be in your area. So find out who's local. I don't know where you're at, so you'll have to look that up. And then of course there's GA and Gam-Anon and other kind of community level support. These are your basics. All right, these are your basic referral resources because people need options. Some are going to want to see a counselor. Some might rather do a GA approach. Some might do a little bit of both. The helplines are basically just a way to get the counselor directory. So if you don't look up who your local providers are, just give them the problem gambling helpline, national, state, whatever, and they'll give them whoever their local providers are, and they can get that information for themselves. The other thing is, gambling has such a ripple effect on anybody closely connected. And let's say I'm not the one gambling. Let's say it's my husband. And I call the gambling helpline. Guess what? They don't need me to put him on the phone. They can talk to me. They can give me resources. And I can choose to do with that what I want. I can either have a conversation with my husband and he and I can work together to get him some help, or I can reach out to those resources myself and I can get some help. In a lot of states, and this is different from substance use, in a lot of states, a close affected loved one can actually admit into a treatment program and get counseling to put their own life back together, even if the person gambling never even shows up. Okay, so it's really important to remember that family deserves recovery too, and there's help services for them too. All right, we're going to close out with a little tutorial on how to screen refer, because I think everybody needs to know how to do this. It's easy, it's simple, and really what it does is gives you a conversation starter. Okay, it gives you an opportunity to set a space where you're not leaving it on the shoulders of someone else to then disclose to you their deepest, darkest secrets that they have a problem with gambling. You, as a professional, are taking it upon yourself to ask them in a way that's safe for them to say whatever it is they want to say. That's kind of what screenings do for you and this ability to do that. All right, so Shane, I see your hand, your digital hand up, and Angelica, I see your virtual hand up. Did either of you have a question, or are you my volunteer? Because I actually do need 2 volunteers. So if you guys are both willing to volunteer, I will use both of you.
I do have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
And I wouldn't mind volunteering. So my friend, they had mentioned that they have a sibling that has a wife that has a problem with addiction. And I'm not going to specify what kind of addiction because it doesn't really matter, but she wanted to get them into treatment. And the problem with that is they're worried about the stigma and the backlash from her job insurance. What do you do about that?
Oh, I love this great real life example, because this is absolutely real. You know, this is what people are dealing with all the time. I'd like to say that people with a gambling addiction are protected in their employment the way that people with a substance addiction are. That's not, however, always the case. With gambling, when an employer finds out their employee has been gambling, often their first question is, what have they stolen from me? Might be nothing, okay? But because it's money related, they may wonder, has their company money gone to the gambling? And because of that stigma, a person's going to have to kind of make a decision for themselves there. Unfortunately, it depends on their boss, their employment. I would recommend check the handbook, check HR. What are their protections as an employee? And what do they know about their boss? Is this person pretty recovery respectful? And a lot of people are, but maybe you wouldn't have any reason to know that, right? Maybe they aren't. So they're going to kind of have to decide, what do I say? How much do I say? Or do I just take PTO and let them know I'm going to be gone? They're going to have to kind of make the decision for themselves. But I'd really recommend that they do some homework in their company policies and maybe through their HR and find out what kind of protections they might have just in case. But unfortunately, the stigma people have, it's there and it's real. I mean, I don't blame them for being concerned about that one bit. I see it. Yeah, good question. I'm sorry I don't have something super more concrete for you. All right, so real quick, and we're just going to do 2 of these probably for the sake of time. The lie bet is a 2-question screener. Here it is right here. 2 questions. One has the word bet in it, one has the word lie in it. That's where the name of the screening came from. And this screening is validated, meaning it went through a bunch of testing to try to determine if a person is screened with these 2 questions, what's the ratio, what's the percentage of how many of those people actually end up having a diagnosable gambling disorder when they go on and then get a full assessment. So this is validated. These are 2 good questions to ask. However, they will miss a lot. The first best practice in gambling screenings is to ask it verbally. Simple enough. Now, if a person comes into a clinical setting and it's just in their paperwork, that's fine. But please have somebody follow up with them afterward verbally. All right. So, Shane, if you want to be my volunteer here, would you like to ask me the questions or would you like me to ask you the questions? Doesn't matter to me.
You can ask me the questions.
Okay. Shane, thank you for coming in today. I'm going to ask you a few gambling questions. Have you ever felt the need to bet more and more money?
Yes.
And have you ever had to lie to people important to you about how much you gambled?
Yes.
Thank you. I appreciate that. These are pretty common problems. It looks like you have experienced some of these issues. So I'm going to give you a referral list if you'd like. And then you at any time can see a professional to get some more information on what other problems you might be dealing with and how you might, what options you have to address them.
Wonderful. Thank you.
That's it basically. Took seconds, right? Not judging anything he said. I don't care that he said yes or no. And like personally, it doesn't have any personal impact on my life. Don't care. Don't have a stigma on that. I'm just saying, hey, it looks like you have dealt with some of these problems. And here's a referral list. I'd recommend getting a professional opinion to see what your options are. Just like when I saw my doctor, he asked me some questions about a skin issue and said, hey, would you like a referral to a dermatologist? It's that casual, okay? Non-judgmental, very, hey, let me do what I can to help you out here. That's it. Now, I skipped a step on purpose because another best practice here, oh, and one of the reasons that it's really good to ask verbally is this little word right here, lie. Do you know how many people define that differently? Right. So by asking it verbally, you can kind of give a little clarification there. And lying means by omission or just not wanting people to find out, hiding betting slips, right? It doesn't have to be I told a lie. It can be I'm just making sure people don't find out about this. That counts. All right. So by asking it verbally, you can do a little bit of that. So the next one is define what is meant by gambling. Because often people don't consider lottery when they think of gambling, bingo, Keno, church raffle fundraisers. They don't think of these things as gambling. They are gambling. Doesn't mean they cause problems, but they're just gambling, right? And if it's gambling, it has the potential to cause problems. Therefore, we need to be conscientious and ask about it. So here's an easy little script. Where's my, there it is. All right, we're going to scroll down to this one. So Shane, if you don't mind helping me again, this one has a little script to define gambling first and then ask questions. Do you want me to ask you or do you want to ask me?
I'll ask you the question.
Okay, let me blow it up for you because I feel like this is a little small. Is that better?
Yes. Okay. So I'm just going to read the one.
Yeah,
before.
and this, yeah, and let me just preface, this is an example script. It doesn't have to be this exactly, okay? But it gives a general idea. We're going to introduce that we ask this to everybody, not singling out here. This is just what we ask. And here's what is meant by gambling. And then you move on. Okay.
So have you ever gambled at least 5 times in any 1 year of your life?
Oh, sorry.
Oh, read the first
up
quote.
here with this
Okay.
little, yeah, there we
of
go.
Course. Just like we ask all patients about tobacco use and medical history, we also ask about gambling. By gambling, it means any form of gambling, casino gambling, lottery or scratch tickets, bingo, Keno, sports betting, any gambling games played on a mobile device, or even betting on games with family or friends, etc. Have you ever gambled at least 5 times in any 1 year of your life?
Yes, I have.
During the past 12 months, have you become restless, irritable, or anxious about when trying to stop or cut down on gambling?
No.
During the past 12 months, have you tried to keep your family or friends from knowing how much you gambled?
Sort of, yeah. I intentionally did not tell them about the last time I went.
During the past 12 months, did you have such financial trouble as a result of your gambling that you had to help with living expenses from family, friends, or welfare?
No, I did not. Now, I didn't give Shane any instructions on what to do with my answers here. So what you do with these short screens is if they say yes to anything, then you'd follow it with, let me give you a referral to somewhere else. Now, for the sake of time, I'm going to skip the last one, but this, that one was the BBGS, Brief Biosocial Gambling Screen is what that stands for. This one's the PGSI, Problem Gambling Severity, just a different screen. I like this one because instead of just giving yes or no options, it gives them a scale. Because if people are feeling, maybe sometimes, but then they just have a yes or no answer, they might be more inclined to just say no, but maybe they have had that issue. So I like that it gives a scale. Again, you just want to define gambling at the top, but when people answer yes to any of these, and this one gives a little score on it, and you have at least one of these screens on the slide handout that I made for you, by the way. But you can also download all of these straight from our website, plus a whole bunch of others. I'm not even bothering to go over today. You can get all signs of gambling screens off of our website. And then what you want to do is feedback, right? Like if you tell your doctor, yeah, I'm having this issue, and they say, okay, and move on, you're like, well, how'd I do? Right? So whatever their answers are, you want to give them feedback. If they say no to everything, your feedback might be something like, looks like you're not having any of these issues. Little trick you guys can do to really amp up your game is, would it be okay if I gave you some resources anyway, just in case you or someone you know might need it in the future one day? Because you didn't just ask them if they're dealing with problems from someone else's gambling. So it's kind of a very subtle way to be respectful of, I didn't ask you very much. Gambling can cause all kinds of problems. You might be dealing with problems because of someone else. So if you do that and you hand them a little resource list, just in case you or someone you know might want it one day, pay attention to how many people say, thank you, I know someone I'm going to give this to. You just planted a little seed, might have a ripple effect to get someone some help. Very, very easy. If you're using a screening tool that has a scoring guide, your feedback would just include the score. Based on your answers, you said this is what that means. Would it be okay if I gave you a resource list just in case you or someone you know needs it one day? Very, very simple, right? And bravo to Shane. At no point did he come across as like judgmental or trying to imply I needed to answer one way or another. He was very, yeah, and how about this one? And how about this one? And how about this one? Thank you much. That's it. Very casual, very compassionate, non-judgmental. And what it does, what you guys can do as a peer recovery coach, and you're a little bit more skilled in working with people and talking to people, right? Is it gives you a chance to chat with them about it. Because when you give people a safe space to talk about gambling and problem gambling, they can get a little chatty. Go for it. Chat it up. Talk with them about their problems. You might discover they don't have an issue, but they're worried about their son. Take a few minutes and talk to them about that. Show some concern and some compassion, and you might be able to help them with something else. Or you plant a seed and then they come back to you 6 months later and they're like, you know when you asked me about gambling before? And now you are their go-to person who's safe that they can talk to when they're ready. Right? So for you, it's not about, like I said before, it's not about trying to find people with an issue who have an addiction. It's not about that. It's about just having a non-judgmental, compassionate conversation. And if they want to start bragging to you about their gambling wins, don't judge that either. Okay? Non-judgmental, no matter what they say, you are just a safe person who can talk about gambling without making it weird. All right? You know a little bit about problem gambling. You understand it can be addicting. You know how easy it can happen. You know how young people start gambling. Yeah, it can be issues. How would you like to change that? Very, very simple. So asking it verbally, defining what is meant by gambling, asking the questions without judgment, and provide feedback or a brief intervention, whatever the case may be, and provide a resource or referral list just in case you or someone you know might need it one day. And you can say that no matter if they said yes or no or anything in between, whatever they say, you can give them a referral list just in case they might need it one day. So we're out of time, right on time. And the last of stuff that's in here for you, just a reminder about that training And then I have put some other resources for you in here. So if you get the slides or download the slides later, you have these. There's our helpline, of course, and Focus on the Future conference. There's a lot of interesting topics. Some of our pre-conference sessions are offered virtually. So if you don't live in Washington and can't attend in person, just check out what we're offering virtually. Those of you who are in Washington would love to see you. We have a podcast on healthy gambling and gaming. We have a number of live streaming events, one on all things related to gambling, gaming, one on all things related to social justice and diversity in our mental health field. You can find all of these on our YouTube channel. March is Problem Gambling Awareness Month. Thank you to CCAR for featuring this topic this month. It's almost over, but lots of good things. And we did a couple, now that you know a little bit more about screening, depending on what populations you work with, we just released 2 videos. One is about screening with the focus on working with tribal communities, and the other with Hispanic Latino communities and focusing on some ways to be culturally sensitive and competent and that sort of thing. So yeah, there's my contact information. It's 10:30 at my time, so we're right on time. So thank you, everyone. Gosh, you guys are fantastic. Thank you all my volunteers and for pitching in with the questions. I hope this is helpful. And like I said, if you want to learn more about like applying peer recovery coach work with people a little bit more in depth, then come to that training in April. And that's what we're really going to be diving into. Awesome. Thank you, everyone. Take care and have a great day.